The slap echoed through the insurance office like a gunshot, and Maureen Sullivan's hand instinctively moved to the record button on her phone. But let me take you back to that morning, when Rebecca Thompson stood in front of her bedroom mirror at 7 months pregnant, admiring the gentle curve of her growing belly. At 32 years old, she had everything she'd ever dreamed of: a successful career as a marketing director, a beautiful home in the suburbs, and a husband who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. Clayton Hayes, her 38-year-old CEO husband, appeared in the mirror behind her, his hands sliding around her waist with practiced affection. "Good morning, beautiful," Clayton murmured against her neck. "How are my two favorite people feeling today?" Rebecca leaned back against his chest, savoring these quiet moments. "We're feeling good. The baby was active all night, though. I think she's going to be a night owl like her daddy." Clayton's hands tightened slightly on her waist. "You need your rest. Rebecca, Dr. Mitchell said stress isn't good for the baby. Maybe you should call in sick today. I have the insurance appointment this afternoon. Remember, besides, I feel fine." "About that," Clayton said, his reflection meeting her eyes in the mirror, "I've decided to come with you." Rebecca turned in his arms, surprised. "Really, you said insurance stuff was boring." "It is, but you're carrying my child. I want to make sure you're getting the best coverage possible." His smile was charming, but something flickered in his eyes. "Plus, you know how you get confused with all those technical terms." The comment stung, but Rebecca had learned to let these small criticisms slide. Clayton was successful, driven, the kind of man who took charge. Maybe she was overthinking things. "That's sweet of you, honey, but I'm perfectly capable of handling a simple insurance meeting." Clayton's jaw tensed almost imperceptibly. "Of course you are. I just want to be involved. Is that such a crime?" Rebecca reached up to touch his face. "No, not at all. I'd love to have you there." The tension in his shoulders relaxed. "Good, now, what are you planning to wear?" Rebecca gestured to the conservative blouse and slacks laid out on the bed. "This seems appropriate. That blouse is getting a little tight. Don't you think maybe something looser would be better? We don't want you looking unprofessional." Heat flushed Rebecca's cheeks. "I think it's fine. Trust me, Rebecca, I see these things objectively. You don't want to look like you're trying too hard to show off your pregnancy." Rebecca bit back her first response and reached for a different blouse. Over the past year, these small corrections had become routine. Clayton had opinions about everything: her clothes, her friends, her work schedule, even her pregnancy cravings. He called it caring. Her best friend April called it something else entirely. As they drove to Rebecca's office that morning, Clayton's hand rested possessively on her thigh while he navigated through traffic with the other. "I was thinking," he said casually, "maybe after the baby comes, you should consider working part-time. The company could manage without you for a while." "We've talked about this. Clayton, I love my job." "I know you do, but priorities change when you become a mother. I just want what's best for our family." Rebecca stared out the window at the passing buildings. When had her opinions become suggestions that Clayton could approve or dismiss? When had her choices become family decisions that he made unilaterally? "Rebecca," Clayton's voice was sharp, "you're not listening to me." "Sorry, I was just thinking." "About what?" "Nothing important." Clayton's grip on her thigh tightened. "Everything you think is important to me? We don't keep secrets." "Remember," Rebecca forced a smile, "just wondering what the insurance agent will be like. Probably some middle-aged woman who'll try to oversell us coverage we don't need. That's why I'm coming. You're too trusting." "Rebecca, people take advantage of that." At her office, Clayton walked her to the door like he did every morning. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect couple. Clayton was handsome, successful, attentive. Rebecca was glowing with pregnancy. Clearly adored by her husband, they were living the American dream. But Rebecca had no idea that Clayton's real reason for coming to the insurance appointment would destroy everything she thought she knew about their marriage. "I'll pick you up at 2:30, Clayton said, kissing her forehead. "Don't be late. You know how I worry." April Jenkins, Rebecca's best friend and coworker, was waiting by her desk with coffee and a knowing look. "Let me guess," April said, settling into the chair across from Rebecca. "Clayton has opinions about your insurance meeting. He's just being supportive." Rebecca, supporting you would be asking how it went afterward. Managing every detail of your life is something else entirely. Rebecca busied herself with opening her laptop. You don't understand our relationship. April. I understand that 6 months ago you had your own opinions about things. Now you check with Clayton before ordering lunch. That's not true. Yesterday you called him to ask if you could have a salad instead of the sandwich he packed for you. Rebecca's fingers stilled on her keyboard. Had she really done that? The memory felt fuzzy, like trying to remember a dream. He's just concerned about my nutrition. The baby needs, the baby needs a mother who remembers she's allowed to make her own choices. April's words followed Rebecca through the morning as she tried to focus on work. When had she stopped trusting her own judgment? When had Clayton's voice become louder than her own inner voice? At 2:30 sharp, Clayton appeared in the office lobby, immaculate in his charcoal suit. He kissed Rebecca's cheek and placed his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the exit. Ready for this insurance adventure? He asked, his tone light and cheerful for the benefit of her co-workers. Ready as I'll ever be. But as they drove toward the insurance office, Rebecca felt an inexplicable sense of dread settling in her stomach. She told herself it was just pregnancy hormones, just nerves about making important financial decisions. She had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, her carefully constructed world would shatter completely. The insurance office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a sandwich shop. The waiting room was small but clean, with motivational posters about planning for the future and protecting what matters most. Maureen Sullivan emerged from her office to greet them. She was a woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Something about her immediately put Rebecca at ease. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, Maureen asked. Thompson, Rebecca corrected automatically. I kept my maiden name. Clayton's hand tightened on her shoulder. She's been talking about changing it since the wedding. Just haven't gotten around to the paperwork yet? Maureen's eyes flicked between them, and Rebecca caught something that might have been concern in her expression. Of course. Please, come into my office. As they settled into the chairs across from Maureen's desk, Rebecca felt Clayton's presence like a weight beside her. His hand remained on her shoulder, his thumb making small circles that she once found comforting, but now felt controlling. So, Maureen began, opening a thick folder, you're looking to establish life insurance policies for both of you, with special consideration for the new baby on the way? That's right, Clayton said before Rebecca could respond. We want to make sure our family's protected no matter what happens. Maureen smiled at Rebecca. Congratulations. When are you due? March, Rebecca answered, then glanced at Clayton. The 15th? Actually, Clayton interjected, Dr. Mitchell said it could be anywhere from the 10th to the 20th. First babies are unpredictable. Rebecca frowned. He said the 15th. Clayton, you might have misunderstood. You know how you get confused when there's medical terminology involved. The room fell silent. Maureen's pen had stopped moving across her notepad, and Rebecca felt heat climb up her neck. I think I understood my own due date correctly, Rebecca said quietly. Clayton's laugh was forced. Of course you did, sweetheart. I'm just trying to be accurate for the insurance purposes. But Maureen Sullivan had been in the insurance business for 20 years, and she'd seen this dynamic before. The way Clayton spoke for his wife, the way Rebecca seemed to shrink into herself, the subtle corrections that weren't corrections at all, but rather challenges to Rebecca's credibility and memory. Maureen made a note in her file, and it wasn't about the due date. Well, she said carefully, let's start with some basic information and work our way through the policy options. This is an important decision, and I want to make sure you both feel completely comfortable with whatever we decide. She had no idea that comfortable was the last thing anyone in that room would be feeling in the next 30 minutes. The insurance office felt different somehow. Maureen Sullivan had been watching Clayton Hayes for the past 15 minutes, and something about him made her skin crawl. It wasn't anything obvious. He was polite, well-dressed, articulate, but there was something in the way he monitored every word his wife spoke, the way his hand never left her shoulder or arm, the way Rebecca seemed to hold her breath before answering even simple questions. Now, Maureen said, consulting her notes, let's talk about beneficiaries. Rebecca, who would you like to name as your primary beneficiary? Clayton, of course. Rebecca answered automatically. And for you? Clayton, Rebecca, he squeezed her shoulder. Though given her condition, we should probably discuss contingencies. Maureen's pen paused. Condition, the pregnancy, Clayton clarified, though his tone suggested it should have been obvious. High-risk pregnancies can be unpredictable. We want to make sure all scenarios are covered. Rebecca's head turned sharply toward her husband. High risk, Doctor. Mitchell never said it was high risk. He didn't use those exact words, but reading between the lines, what lines he said, everything was progressing normally. Clayton's smile remained fixed, but his grip on Rebecca's shoulder tightened. Let's not bore Ms. Sullivan with our medical discussions. The point is, we want comprehensive coverage. Maureen had been doing this job long enough to recognize the signs. She'd seen women with unexplained bruises, wives who let their husbands answer every question, couples where one person's reality seemed to shift based on the other person's presence. She'd taken training courses on domestic violence recognition, though she'd never had to use that training before. Actually, Maureen said carefully, I'd like to speak with each of you individually about your policy preferences. It's standard procedure to ensure that both parties are making informed decisions independently. Clayton's facade cracked slightly. That seems unnecessary. We make all our financial decisions together. I understand, but insurance regulations require individual consultations to prevent coercion or fraud. The word coercion hung in the air like a challenge. I'll speak with Rebecca first, Maureen continued. And then with you, Clayton. It'll just take a few minutes each. Clayton's hand moved from Rebecca's shoulder to her wrist, his fingers wrapping around it in what might have looked like an affectionate gesture. Rebecca doesn't mind if I stay. Do you, sweetheart? Rebecca's eyes darted between her husband and the insurance agent. Whatever you think is best. I think what's best is following proper procedure, Maureen said firmly. Clayton, there's a comfortable waiting area just outside. This won't take long. For a moment, Clayton didn't move. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable, and Rebecca found herself holding her breath again. Fine, Clayton said finally, his voice tight. But make it quick. We have dinner reservations. After Clayton left, closing the door with unnecessary force, Maureen turned to Rebecca with gentle eyes. How are you feeling? Rebecca, really feeling? I'm fine. The pregnancy is going well, despite what Clayton said about it being high risk. Dr. Mitchell has been very reassuring. And emotionally, how are you handling the stress of pregnancy and preparing for a new baby? Rebecca's hand moved instinctively to her belly. It's overwhelming sometimes. Clayton helps a lot. He's very involved. Involved how? He comes to all my doctor appointments. He researches everything about pregnancy and baby care. He's even been tracking my nutrition and exercise. Rebecca smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. He says he wants to make sure I'm doing everything right. Maureen made another note. That sounds very dedicated. Do you ever feel like you need space to make your own decisions about your pregnancy? The question seemed to catch Rebecca off guard. Space. Why would I need space? We're married. We're supposed to make decisions together. Of course, but your body, your pregnancy experience, those are uniquely yours. Do you feel like you have autonomy over your own medical decisions? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Through the thin walls, they could hear Clayton pacing in the waiting room, his expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. I never really thought about it that way, Rebecca said finally. Clayton knows a lot about these things. He researches everything. I trust his judgment. But what about your judgment? What does your instinct tell you about your pregnancy, your body, your needs? Rebecca's hand tightened on her belly. I used to trust my instincts more before I met Clayton. But he's shown me how many things I was wrong about. Little things, mostly. The way I dressed for work, the friends I spent time with, the food I ate. He's usually right about these things. Maureen felt a chill run down her spine. She'd heard variations of this story too many times to count in her domestic violence training seminars. Rebecca, can I ask you something personal? Have you ever felt afraid of Clayton? Afraid? Rebecca's laugh was too quick, too bright. No, of course not. Clayton would never hurt me. He loves me. He's protecting me. Protection and control can sometimes look very similar from the outside. You don't understand, Rebecca said, her voice rising slightly. You don't know what my life was like before Clayton. I was making mistake after mistake. Bad relationships, poor career choices, terrible with money. Clayton helped me see what I was doing wrong. Or maybe, Maureen said gently, you were just learning and growing like every other human being. Making mistakes is how we figure out what works for us. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I don't know anymore. I used to be so sure about things. Now I second guess everything. That's not necessarily growth. Rebecca, that might be something else entirely. Before Rebecca could respond, Clayton's voice boomed through the door. How much longer is this going to take? We have places to be. Rebecca immediately straightened, wiping her eyes. We should probably wrap this up. Clayton doesn't like to be kept waiting. Maureen reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a business card, but instead of her insurance agency card, it was for a local domestic violence resource center. Rebecca, I want you to take this, just in case you ever need someone to talk to. Rebecca stared at the card like it was a snake. I don't need this. My marriage isn't. We're not. Clayton has never hit me. Physical violence isn't the only kind of abuse. Rebecca. Abuse. Rebecca's voice was sharp now. My husband is not abusive. He's successful. He's devoted to our family. He takes care of me. Just because he has opinions about things doesn't make him abusive. Maureen held up her hands. You're absolutely right. I apologize if I overstepped. I just want you to know that resources exist if you ever need them. Rebecca reluctantly took the card and shoved it into her purse. Can we please just finish the insurance paperwork? Of course, just one more question, and then we'll bring Clayton back in. Are there any domestic violence exclusions in the policies we're discussing? The question hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Exclusions. Some life insurance policies have clauses that void coverage if the death results from domestic violence. It's rare, but it exists. Rebecca's face went pale. Why would you ask me that? It's a standard question for all clients, but I notice you seem upset by it. I'm not upset. I'm confused about why you'd think that would be relevant to us. Through the door, they heard Clayton's pacing stop. Then his voice, louder than before. Is everything okay in there? Maureen looked at Rebecca carefully. Before I bring your husband back in, is there anything else you want to tell me? Anything you want to discuss privately? Rebecca's hand moved to her wrist, where Clayton had been gripping it earlier. For just a moment, Maureen saw something flicker across her face. Fear, recognition, understanding. But then it was gone. No, Rebecca said firmly. There's nothing else to discuss. But as Maureen called Clayton back into the office, she made a decision that would change everything. She reached for her phone and quietly activated the voice recording app. 20 years in insurance had taught her that sometimes the most important conversations happened when people thought no one was listening. When Maureen asked about domestic violence exclusions, Clayton's mask slipped for just a second, but Rebecca saw it, and so did Maureen's phone, which was now recording everything. The pregnancy wasn't planned, and Clayton had been trying to convince Rebecca to terminate it for months. This revelation hit Maureen like a physical blow as she listened to Clayton's response to her question about domestic violence exclusions. His reaction wasn't confusion or concern about why such a question would be relevant. Instead, it was pure rage barely contained beneath a veneer of civility. Domestic violence exclusions, Clayton repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Are you suggesting that my wife and I have some kind of situation that would make such a clause relevant? Rebecca's face had gone completely white. Clayton, she's just asking standard questions. No, Rebecca, this isn't standard. This woman is implying something very specific about our marriage. Maureen kept her voice professional and calm. Mr. Hayes, I ask all my clients about policy exclusions. It's part of my job to ensure you understand exactly what is and isn't covered. And what exactly gave you the impression that domestic violence might be a concern in our household? The question hung in the air like a threat. Rebecca's hand moved protectively over her belly, and Maureen noticed the gesture. Sir, I'm not implying anything. I'm simply doing my due diligence to your due diligence. Clayton's voice rose. Your due diligence should involve insurance. not making character judgments about your clients. Rebecca reached over to touch Clayton's arm. Honey, please. Let's just answer her questions and move on. Clayton jerked his arm away from her touch. Don't honey me. Rebecca, can't you see what she's doing? She's been trying to turn you against me this entire meeting. That's not what happened. Isn't it first she insists on speaking to you alone, filling your head with God knows what nonsense? Then she starts asking about domestic violence like we're some kind of criminal couple. Maureen's finger hovered over her phone's record button. Every instinct she'd developed over 2 decades of reading people was screaming at her to document this conversation. Mr. Hayes, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Clayton snapped, is your assumption that you can psychoanalyze my marriage based on a 30-minute conversation? Rebecca was shrinking into her chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Clayton, maybe we should just go. We can get insurance somewhere else. No, Clayton's voice was firm. We're not running away because this woman wants to play amateur therapist. We're going to finish this paperwork and get the coverage we came for. Maureen made her decision. She pressed record. Actually, she said carefully, before we continue with the paperwork, I need to ask about some medical information that's relevant to the policy. Rebecca, you mentioned you're 7 months pregnant. Have there been any complications? No complications, Rebecca said quickly. Everything's been normal. What about the bleeding you mentioned earlier? Rebecca looked confused. I didn't mention any bleeding. Clayton's head snapped toward his wife. What bleeding, Rebecca? What bleeding? I don't know what she's talking about. I never said anything about bleeding. Maureen frowned, pretending to consult her notes. I could have sworn. Maybe I misheard. Have you had any bleeding during this pregnancy? Rebecca glanced nervously at Clayton. I had some light spotting a few weeks ago, but Dr. Mitchell said it was normal. Nothing to worry about. Clayton's face was turning red. You never told me about bleeding because it wasn't important. The doctor said, You never told me about bleeding. Rebecca, Clayton's voice exploded through the small office. Are you trying to kill our baby through negligence? The words hit Rebecca like a slap. Clayton, that's not fair. Fair. You're hiding medical symptoms from me during your pregnancy, and you're worried about what's fair? I wasn't hiding anything. It was minor spotting. Women get spotting during pregnancy all the time. How would you know this is your first pregnancy? You don't know what's normal and what isn't. Rebecca's voice grew stronger. I know because my doctor told me. Your doctor who sees you for 15 minutes every month. Your doctor who's handling dozens of other pregnant women and probably can't even remember your name. Dr. Mitchell is a good doctor. Dr. Mitchell is a liability. We should have gone with the specialist I recommended from the beginning. You recommended him because he's more expensive, not because he's better. Clayton stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. I recommended him because I want the best care for my wife and child, but apparently, you prefer to make medical decisions based on what's convenient for you rather than what's safe for our baby. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been keeping medical information from me, making unilateral decisions about our child's health, and now you're sitting in front of a stranger acting like I'm some kind of monster for caring about your welfare? Rebecca stood up too, her hand on her belly. Stop treating me like a child. Clayton, I'm 32 years old. I'm capable of managing my own pregnancy. Clearly, you're not. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Maureen watched the dynamics shift, saw the moment when Rebecca's protective instincts finally overrode her learned helplessness. I am not incompetent, Rebecca said, her voice steady for the first time all afternoon. I am not confused. I am not making dangerous decisions. I am a grown woman having a normal pregnancy, and I don't need you to manage every detail of my medical care. Clayton's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Maureen realized this might be the first time Rebecca had ever stood up to him in public. You're being emotional, Clayton said finally. Pregnancy hormones are making you irrational. No, Rebecca said firmly. Pregnancy hormones are making me protective. There's a difference. Protective of what your right to keep medical secrets from your husband. Protective of my right to make my own decisions about my own body. The silence that followed was deafening. Through the thin walls, Maureen could hear normal office sounds, phones ringing, keyboards clicking. conversations about coverage limits and deductibles. But in her office, the air was electric with tension. Clayton's voice, when he finally spoke, was dangerously quiet. Your body is carrying my child. Rebecca, that makes it my business. The baby is our business. My body is mine. Is it because the way you've been acting lately? It seems like you think this whole pregnancy is just about you. How have I been acting? Clayton, tell me exactly how I've been acting. Selfish, secretive, ungrateful. Each word was like a small explosion. Rebecca's face crumpled, and for a moment, Maureen thought she would sit back down and apologize. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. I have been grateful every single day of this pregnancy. Grateful for this baby, grateful for my health, grateful for Dr. Mitchell's care. The only thing I'm not grateful for is being treated like an incompetent child by my own husband. Clayton took a step toward her. You are an incompetent child. You can't even remember to mention bleeding to your husband. What else are you hiding from me? Rebecca, what other symptoms are you keeping secret because you think you know better than everyone else? I'm not hiding anything. Aren't you? What about the dizzy spells you had last month? What about the back pain you've been complaining about? What about the fact that you've been sleeping poorly for weeks? Those are normal pregnancy symptoms. According to who? According to the same doctor who told you spotting was nothing to worry about. According to the same medical judgment that led you to keep secrets from your husband. Rebecca's voice broke. They weren't secrets. Clayton, they were minor issues that didn't require discussion. Everything about this pregnancy requires discussion. Everything about our child's welfare is my business. The fact that you don't understand that shows exactly how unfit you are to make these decisions alone. And that's when Rebecca snapped. 7 months of walking on eggshells. 7 months of second-guessing every decision. 7 months of being treated like an incompetent vessel for Clayton's child rather than a human being carrying their baby. I am not unfit, she shouted. I am tired of being told I'm wrong about everything. I'm tired of you acting like I'm some kind of danger to this baby. I'm tired of you treating me like I'm stupid. Clayton's hand moved before anyone could react. The slap echoed through the insurance office like a gunshot, and Maureen Sullivan's hand instinctively moved to the record button on her phone. But the recording was already running, and it had captured everything. Within 20 minutes, 3 police officers, 1 social worker, and Clayton's own business partner were standing in that insurance office. The immediate aftermath of the slap was silence so complete that Maureen could hear her own heartbeat. Rebecca stood frozen, her hand pressed against her cheek, staring at Clayton as if she'd never seen him before. Clayton himself looked shocked, as though his hand had acted independently of his will. Sir, Maureen said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. I'm afraid this policy application is now void, and I'm required by law to report what I just witnessed. Clayton blinked rapidly, his brain seeming to catch up with his actions. Report what Rebecca fell. She's pregnant. She lost her balance. Sir, I recorded the entire incident. There was no fall. The color drained from Clayton's face. You recorded us without consent. That's illegal. Actually, in this state, single-party consent is sufficient for recording conversations. And given the nature of what just occurred, this recording is now evidence in a criminal matter. Rebecca finally found her voice. Maureen, please. It was an accident. Clayton didn't mean, Mrs. Thompson, Maureen interrupted gently. Domestic violence in the presence of a witness is a mandatory reporting situation. I don't have a choice in this matter. Clayton stepped toward Maureen's desk. Now wait just a minute. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Couples argue. Things get heated. That doesn't make it a criminal matter. Physical assault makes it a criminal matter. Mr. Hayes. Physical assault. Clayton's laugh was sharp and bitter. I barely touched her. Rebecca, tell her it didn't even hurt. Rebecca's hand was still pressed against her cheek, her eyes wide and confused. It stung a little, but nothing, Maureen said firmly. She was already dialing 911 with one hand while keeping her phone with the recording secure in the other. Yes, I need to report a domestic violence incident. The perpetrator is still on scene. Clayton lunged toward Maureen's desk. Hang up that phone right now. You're making a huge mistake. "Oh, sir, step back. Do not approach me." "Clayton," Rebecca said weakly, "maybe you should calm down." "Calm down. This woman just destroyed our lives over a misunderstanding. And you want me to calm down?" The first police officer arrived within 6 minutes. Officer Maria Santos was a 10-year veteran who'd responded to hundreds of domestic violence calls, and she immediately assessed the situation with professional efficiency. "Ma'am," she said to Maureen, "you reported an assault." "Yes, I witnessed Mr. Hayes strike his pregnant wife across the face. I have audio and video recording of the incident." Officer Santos turned to Rebecca. "Ma'am, are you injured?" Rebecca looked helplessly between the officer and Clayton. "I'm not hurt. Not really. It was just a slap." "Are you experiencing any pain? Any marks or swelling?" Rebecca reluctantly lowered her hand from her cheek, revealing a clear red handprint across her face. "Ma'am, I need to take photographs of your injuries. And I'm going to need to ask you some questions privately." "That's not necessary," Clayton interjected. "This was a private matter between my wife and me." Officer Santos turned to Clayton with the kind of look that had intimidated suspects for a decade. "Sir, domestic violence is never a private matter. Please step outside with my partner." As if summoned by her words, Officer James Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. "Everything under control here, Santos." "Mr. Hayes was just about to step outside with you for a conversation." Clayton looked around the room desperately. "This is insane. Rebecca, tell them. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding." Rebecca opened her mouth and then closed it again. For the first time in months, she didn't immediately rush to smooth over Clayton's actions or make excuses for his behavior. "Ma'am," Officer Santos prompted gently, "would you like to tell me what happened?" "We were discussing insurance," Rebecca said slowly. "Clayton got upset about some medical information I hadn't shared with him. He said some hurtful things. I stood up for myself. And then he—" She touched her cheek again. "Then he hit me." Officer Santos nodded. "And is this the first time he's hit you?" The question hung in the air. Rebecca glanced toward the window, where she could see Clayton gesticulating wildly at Officer Rodriguez. "Yes," she said finally. "He's never hit me before. But there have been other incidents other times when you felt threatened or intimidated." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. "Not threatened, exactly, but sometimes I feel like I can't do anything right. Like I'm always disappointing him." Maureen spoke up. "Officer, I should mention that during our conversation earlier, I gave Mrs. Thompson a domestic violence resource card. Her reaction suggested this might not be completely out of character for Mr. Hayes." Officer Santos looked at Rebecca. "Is that true?" "She asked me some questions that made me uncomfortable. About whether I felt like I had autonomy in my marriage, whether I trusted my own judgment about things." "And how did you answer those questions?" Rebecca's voice was barely a whisper. "I told her that Clayton usually knows better than I do about important things, that I trust his judgment more than my own." Officer Santos exchanged a look with Maureen. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm going to ask you this directly, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you feel safe going home with your husband tonight?" The question seemed to paralyze Rebecca. She looked around the office as if seeing it for the first time, the motivational posters about planning for the future. Maureen's concerned face, the evidence of her normal life before everything changed 30 minutes ago. "I don't know," she whispered. That's when Leonard Burke arrived. Clayton's business partner burst through the office door like a man on a mission, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Clayton," he called out, then stopped short when he saw the police officers and the general chaos of the scene. "What in God's name is going on here?" Officer Rodriguez stepped forward. "Sir, are you involved in this situation?" "Leonard Burke, I'm Mr. Hayes's business partner. I got a call from our secretary saying Clayton was in some kind of trouble." Officer Santos looked confused. "Who called your secretary?" Leonard's face flushed. "I... Clayton did. About 10 minutes ago. He said he needed me to get down here immediately because some insurance agent was trying to destroy his life." The officers exchanged looks. "He called you while we were talking to him." "Apparently so." Officer Rodriguez shook his head. "Sir, Your business partner is currently being detained in connection with a domestic violence incident. You might want to contact an attorney rather than trying to intervene in an active police investigation. Leonard's eyes widened as he took in the scene. Rebecca's red cheek, the officers, the obvious tension in the room. Domestic violence, Clayton. What did you do? Through the window, they could see Clayton's face contort with rage. His voice carried clearly through the glass. I didn't do anything. This is all a setup. That insurance woman is crazy. Leonard turned to Rebecca. Are you okay? Rebecca nodded slowly. I think so. Leonard, Maureen said carefully, I think you should know that I have audio and video recording of Mr. Hayes striking his wife across the face. This isn't a misunderstanding or a setup. This is documented assault. Leonard's face went completely white. Oh my God, Clayton, what have you done? But the recording revealed something else. Something Clayton thought he'd hidden forever. As Officer Santos took Rebecca's statement and Maureen provided her recording to the police, a clearer picture began to emerge. This wasn't an isolated incident of a man losing his temper. This was the culmination of months of psychological manipulation, control, and emotional abuse. And now it was all on record. The background check revealed Clayton's pattern with his previous girlfriend. Sarah Chen had dated Clayton for 2 years before Rebecca, and when Officer Santos ran Clayton's name through the system, Sarah's police report from 3 years ago popped up immediately. Harassment and stalking charges, Officer Santos told Rebecca as they sat in the Victim Services office 2 hours later. She filed a restraining order against him after their breakup. He violated it twice. Rebecca felt like she was floating outside her own body. Stalking, following her to work, showing up at her apartment uninvited, calling her family members to convince them she was making a mistake by leaving him. Officer Santos consulted her notes. Sound familiar? Rebecca thought about the way Clayton had systematically isolated her from friends, convinced her that her own judgment was flawed, made her dependent on his approval for every decision. What happened to the charges? Dropped? Sarah Chen left town suddenly and didn't follow through with prosecution. Left town. According to the report, she transferred to her company's branch office in Seattle. Said she needed a fresh start. Rebecca's hand moved instinctively to her belly. Do you think he threatened her? I think, Officer Santos said carefully, that women don't usually relocate across the country to avoid men who were just overly persistent. While Rebecca was learning about Clayton's past, April Jenkins was conducting her own investigation. She'd been documenting Rebecca's accidents with photographs for months, though she'd never admitted it to her friend. April's phone was full of pictures: Rebecca's bruised wrist from falling downstairs in November, her black eye from walking into a door in December, her sprained ankle from tripping over the cat in January. The photos told a different story than Rebecca's explanations ever had. I kept thinking I was being paranoid, April told Detective Sarah Williams when she arrived at the police station with her evidence. Rebecca always had reasonable explanations for everything. Detective Williams, a specialist in domestic violence cases, studied the photographs on April's phone. These injuries are consistent with physical abuse, the wrist bruising in particular. Those look like grip marks. Rebecca said she fell down the stairs at home. Mrs. Thompson, in my experience, when someone falls downstairs, they get bruises on their arms, legs, maybe their back. They don't get perfect finger-shaped bruises around their wrists. April's eyes filled with tears. I should have said something sooner. You said something now. That's what matters. But the physical evidence was just the beginning. When Detective Williams obtained a warrant to examine Clayton's financial records, she discovered a pattern of embezzlement from his own company that went back over a year. Leonard Burke was waiting in the detective's office when she returned with the financial documents. I had no idea, Leonard said, running his hands through his hair. The books always balanced. Clayton handled most of the client accounts personally. Mr. Burke, according to these records, your business partner has been systematically transferring funds from client accounts into a personal account under his wife's name? Leonard's face went ashen. Rebecca's account, an account with her name on it, but according to the bank records, she's never accessed it. All transactions were conducted by your partner using online banking. How much are we talking about? Over the past 18 months, approximately $400,000. Leonard sank into his chair. 400,000? Jesus Christ. We'll lose everything. Our reputation, our clients, our business license. Mr. Burke, I need to ask you some direct questions about your partner's behavior. Have you ever witnessed him being aggressive or controlling with his wife? Leonard was quiet for a long moment. I always thought he was just protective. Rebecca is younger than him, less experienced in business matters. Clayton said he was helping her learn to make better decisions. What kind of decisions? Career choices, financial planning, even social situations. Clayton would explain to people that Rebecca was still learning to navigate professional environments. Detective Williams made notes. Did Mrs. Thompson ever express opinions that differed from her husband's? Not that I saw. If Clayton said something, Rebecca would nod and agree. I thought they were just very compatible. Or, Detective Williams said grimly, she'd learned that disagreeing with him had consequences. Meanwhile, Rebecca was sitting in Maureen Sullivan's office, finally ready to hear what the insurance agent had been trying to tell her all afternoon. The bruises on your wrists, Maureen said gently. I noticed them when you first came in. They look like grip marks. Rebecca looked down at her wrists, as if seeing the fading marks for the first time. I bruise easily. Always have. Rebecca, I want to show you something. Maureen pulled out a pamphlet about domestic violence warning signs. Would you mind reading through this with me? As they went through the list together, Rebecca felt a sinking recognition with each item, controlling behavior disguised as concern, isolating you from friends and family, making you doubt your own memory and judgment, monitoring your activities and whereabouts, using money to control your choices, explosive anger followed by apologies and promises to change. This describes my marriage, Rebecca whispered. I know it does. But he never hit me before today, Maureen nodded. Physical violence often escalates during pregnancy. The abuser feels threatened by the woman's changing priorities and divided attention. Rebecca was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. Maureen, can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you record our conversation today? Maureen sighed. 23 years ago, I was married to a man who treated me very much like Clayton treats you. The only difference was that when he finally hit me in public, no one was recording. I had no proof. He convinced everyone that I was unstable, that pregnancy hormones had made me delusional. What happened? I lost custody of my daughter for 6 months while the courts sorted everything out. By the time I got her back, I'd lost my job, my house, and most of my friends. I swore that if I ever witnessed what I went through, I'd make sure there was evidence. Rebecca's hand moved to her belly. Is the baby okay after all this stress? We should get you checked out at the hospital. But Rebecca, stress from standing up for yourself is different from stress from being abused. Your body knows the difference. The phone call from Dr. Mitchell changed everything. The stress had triggered early labor. At 34 weeks pregnant, Rebecca Thompson found herself in the back of an ambulance, sirens wailing, racing toward the hospital where her baby would be born 6 weeks early because her husband couldn't control his temper in public. But for the first time in months, despite the chaos and fear, Rebecca felt something she'd almost forgotten. She felt proud of herself for finally fighting back. Rebecca was rushed to the hospital at 34 weeks, and the baby was in distress from maternal stress hormones. Dr. Harold Mitchell met the ambulance at the emergency room entrance, his usually calm demeanor replaced by urgent concern. Rebecca, how are you feeling? Any contractions? Some cramping? Rebecca gasped as they wheeled her through the automatic doors. Dr. Mitchell, is the baby going to be okay? We're going to monitor both of you very carefully. Babies born at 34 weeks typically do very well, but we want to try to stop labor if possible. April arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes. Having gotten the call from Officer Santos, she found Rebecca in a labor and delivery room, hooked up to monitors that showed the baby's heartbeat and Rebecca's uterine activity. How are you doing? April asked, taking Rebecca's hand. Scared, Rebecca admitted. Not just about the baby, about everything. Dr. Mitchell came in to check the monitors. Good news, the contractions are slowing down, and baby's heart rate is stabilizing. We're going to keep you here overnight for observation, but I think we've stopped the labor for now. Dr. Mitchell, Rebecca said quietly. I need to tell you something. Clayton hit me today. That's why I'm here. Dr. Mitchell's expression hardened. Rebecca, I need to examine you for any injuries that might affect your pregnancy. And I need to document everything for legal purposes. As Dr. Mitchell carefully photographed the handprint on Rebecca's face and the finger-shaped bruises on her wrists, Rebecca felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, someone was taking official notice of what had been happening to her. Rebecca, looking at these older bruises, I have to ask, has this happened before? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Not hitting, exactly, but gripping, controlling, making me feel like I couldn't trust my own judgment about my body or my pregnancy. I wish you'd told me sooner. I didn't realize it was wrong. He convinced me he was just being protective. Dr. Mitchell sat down beside her bed. Rebecca, what happened today probably saved your life and your baby's life. Domestic violence typically escalates during pregnancy. If Clayton was willing to hit you in public, in front of a witness, what do you think he might have done in private after the baby was born? The question sent chills down Rebecca's spine. That's when Clayton violated the emergency restraining order and showed up at the hospital. Rebecca was dozing when she heard familiar voices in the hallway outside her room. Clayton's voice was unmistakable, even when he was trying to keep it low. I need to see my wife. She's having pregnancy complications because of this ridiculous situation. Sir, you're not allowed to be here, a nurse's voice responded firmly. I'm her husband. I have a right to see her. Sir, there's a restraining order in place. Hospital security is on the way. Rebecca's heart started racing, which immediately set off alarms on the fetal monitor. April jumped up from her chair. What's wrong? Clayton's here, Rebecca whispered. April looked out the window into the hallway, where Clayton was arguing with two nurses and a security guard. I'm calling the police. Through the window, Rebecca could see Clayton's face contorted with rage as he gestured wildly. Other patients and visitors had stopped to stare at the commotion. He's making a scene, Rebecca said, mortified. Everyone's looking. Good, April said fiercely. Let them look. Let them see exactly what kind of man he really is. Hospital security arrived first, followed quickly by two police officers. Clayton's voice carried clearly through the corridor as they tried to escort him out. This is harassment. I'm trying to check on my pregnant wife, who was hospitalized because of a misunderstanding. Sir, violating a restraining order is a criminal offense, one of the officers said. You need to leave immediately or you'll be arrested. Arrested for trying to see my own wife. This is insane. Rebecca watched through the window as Clayton's public facade completely crumbled. The successful CEO, the charming husband, the concerned father-to-be, all of it disappeared, leaving only a man having a public tantrum because he couldn't control the narrative anymore. Ma'am, one of the nurses said, coming into Rebecca's room. Are you okay? Your heart rate spiked when this started. I'm scared, Rebecca admitted. I've never seen him like this in public before. Like what? So, exposed. Usually, he's very careful about his image. This is different. April squeezed her hand. This is what happens when abusers lose control. They can't maintain the mask anymore. Through the window, they watched as Clayton was handcuffed and led away, still shouting about his rights as a husband and father. Other patients and visitors recorded the scene on their phones. Rebecca, April said quietly, I think you need to see this. She showed Rebecca her phone, where a news crew was setting up in the hospital parking lot. The story was already spreading on social media. CEO caught on camera assaulting pregnant wife, violates restraining order at hospital. Oh God, Rebecca breathed. This is going to be everywhere. Good, April said again. Do you know how many women are watching this story right now? Recognizing their own lives and what happened to you? You just became visible proof that abuse can happen to anyone, and that fighting back is possible. Dr. Mitchell returned to check on Rebecca after the commotion died down. How are you feeling after all that excitement? Strangely, better, Rebecca said. Seeing him lose control like that in public, it made me realize how much energy I've been spending trying to manage his moods and protect his image. And now I just want to protect my baby and myself. Dr. Mitchell smiled. That's exactly the right priority. Over the next few hours, Rebecca's phone buzzed constantly with text messages and calls. Her estranged parents called after seeing the news. Old friends she hadn't spoken to in months reached out with support and offers of help. "I had no idea how many people were worried about me," Rebecca told April. "I thought I was hiding everything so well." "You weren't hiding anything. Rebecca, Clayton was isolating you. There's a difference." As evening approached, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced in months: peace. Despite being in a hospital bed, despite the premature labor scare, despite the public humiliation of her private life being broadcast on the news, she felt calm. "April, can I tell you something? Anything. I feel proud of myself. For the first time in a long time, I feel proud of how I handled myself today." "You should be proud. You stood up for yourself and your baby when it mattered most." Rebecca's hand moved to her belly, where the baby was moving normally, no longer in distress. "I think she's proud of me too." But Clayton had one last card to play, and it was the cruelest yet. The letter arrived by hospital courier at 8 p.m., marked urgent medical emergency. Inside was a single sheet of paper with Clayton's handwriting: "Rebecca, I can't live without you and our baby. I'm going to end this tonight. If I can't have my family, I don't want to live. This is all my fault, but I can't fix it now. Take care of our daughter. Tell her I loved her. Clayton." Rebecca stared at the letter, her hands shaking. Even from a jail cell, Clayton had found a way to make her crisis about him. But this time, instead of rushing to save him from the consequences of his own actions, Rebecca handed the letter to Officer Santos, who had come to take her final statement. "This is emotional manipulation," Rebecca said calmly. "He's trying to make me feel responsible for his choices." Officer Santos read the letter and nodded grimly. "We'll do a welfare check. But Mrs. Thompson, you should know that this is a classic abuser tactic, threatening suicide to regain control." "I know," Rebecca said, "and for the first time, I'm not falling for it." Clayton's suicide threat was a calculated manipulation designed to force Rebecca back into the role of his caretaker and protector. Within an hour of the letter's delivery, Rebecca's phone was flooded with calls from Clayton's family members, all variations on the same theme. How could she let things get this far? Gwendolyn Hayes, Clayton's mother, arrived at the hospital despite visiting hours being over. She was a woman in her 60s who had spent a lifetime making excuses for her son's behavior, and she wasn't about to stop now. "Rebecca, dear," Gwendolyn said, settling into the chair beside the hospital bed with the entitlement of someone who'd never been told no. "We need to talk about this situation. Mrs. Hayes, visiting hours are over, and there's a restraining order. That restraining order is nonsense, and you know it. Clayton made a mistake, yes, but destroying his life over one moment of poor judgment seems excessive." April, who had been dozing in the corner chair, sat up immediately. "Mrs. Hayes, your son assaulted his pregnant wife. That's not poor judgment. That's a crime." Gwendolyn waved her hand dismissively. "Young women today are so dramatic. In my day, we understood that marriage required forgiveness and compromise." Rebecca felt her chest tighten with familiar anxiety. For months, Gwendolyn had been subtly undermining her confidence, always with a smile and always under the guise of helpful advice. "Mrs. Hayes," Rebecca said carefully, "Clayton didn't just make a mistake. He's been controlling and manipulative throughout our entire marriage." "Controlling?" Gwendolyn's laugh was sharp. "Dear, successful men have opinions about how things should be done. That's not controlling. That's leadership. Leadership doesn't involve slapping someone across the face. One moment of anger doesn't define a person's entire character. Rebecca, Clayton loves you desperately. That's why he lost his temper." April stood up. "Mrs. Hayes, I think you should leave. Rebecca needs to rest." "I think," Gwendolyn said coolly, "that Rebecca needs to consider the bigger picture. Clayton is talking about suicide. Are you prepared to live with that on your conscience?" The words hit their target perfectly. Rebecca's hand moved to her belly as familiar guilt washed over her. "That's not Rebecca's responsibility," April said firmly. "Isn't it? She's his wife. She's carrying his child. If something happens to Clayton because she refused to forgive him, what kind of mother does that make her?" Rebecca felt the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the need to fix things, to smooth over conflicts, to sacrifice her own well-being for everyone else's comfort. Mrs. Hayes, Rebecca said slowly, if Clayton hurts himself, that's his choice, not mine. Gwendolyn's facade of grandmotherly concern slipped. That's a very cold thing to say about the father of your child. What's cold is using suicide threats to manipulate people. You've changed, Rebecca. This isn't the sweet girl Clayton fell in love with. You're right, Rebecca said with growing strength. I have changed. I've remembered that I'm allowed to protect myself and my baby. Protect yourself from what? From a man who provides for you, who loves you, who wants to build a family with you. From a man who hits me when I disagree with him. The room fell silent. Through the window, they could see normal hospital activity. Visitors leaving, nurses making rounds, life going on as usual. But in this room, 3 generations of women's different relationships with male authority were on full display. Rebecca, Gwendolyn said finally, I raised Clayton to be a good man. If he's having problems, it's because something in his environment has changed. The implication was clear. Rebecca was the problem. Mrs. Hayes, April said, standing up, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You're upsetting a patient who's at risk for premature labor. I'm trying to save my son's life and his marriage. Your son's life and marriage aren't Rebecca's responsibility to save. After Gwendolyn left, Rebecca lay in the dark hospital room thinking about cycles of abuse, about enablers and victims, about the difference between love and control. April, she said quietly, do you think I'm being too harsh? What if Clayton really does hurt himself? Rebecca, listen to me. Men who are actually suicidal don't usually announce it in manipulative letters designed to control their wives' behavior. They get help. The next morning brought news that confirmed April's assessment. Clayton hadn't hurt himself. Instead, he'd spent the night calling every mutual friend and family member he could reach, trying to build a coalition of people who would pressure Rebecca to drop the charges. Detective Williams visited Rebecca to provide an update on the case. Mrs. Thompson, I need to let you know that your husband's legal team is preparing a defense strategy that involves character assassination. What does that mean? They're going to claim that you were the aggressor in the relationship, that you were emotionally abusive to your husband, and that he was the victim. Rebecca felt sick. How can they say that there's a recording of him hitting me? They're not denying the physical contact. They're claiming it was self-defense. Self-defense against what? According to their preliminary statements, they plan to argue that you were emotionally manipulative, that you threatened to take his child away from him, and that you were financially abusive. Rebecca's mind reeled. Financially abusive. He controlled every aspect of our finances. Yes, but remember, he was stealing from his own company and putting money in an account with your name on it. They're going to claim you knew about it and were blackmailing him. That's insane. I never even knew that account existed. I believe you, but they're going to paint a picture of a manipulative woman who drove her husband to desperate acts through emotional torture. April gripped Rebecca's hand. Can they actually make that stick? Not with the evidence we have. The recording clearly shows who the aggressor was, and we have testimonies from multiple witnesses about Mr. Hayes' controlling behavior. But it's going to be an ugly fight. Rebecca closed her eyes. He's going to try to destroy my reputation to save his own. Yes, but Rebecca, you need to understand something important. This defense strategy only works if you cooperate with it. If you start doubting yourself, if you start believing that maybe you are the problem, then they win. How do I fight something like this? By telling the truth, by trusting the evidence, and by remembering that the man who loves you doesn't try to convince the world that you're crazy when you ask him to stop hurting you. That afternoon, Maureen Sullivan visited the hospital with unexpected news. Rebecca, I wanted you to know that since your story hit the news, my office has received over 200 phone calls from women sharing their own experiences with domestic violence. 200. Women who saw themselves in your situation. Women who recognized their own relationships in what happened to you. Some of them are ready to leave their abusers for the first time. Rebecca felt tears building. I never wanted to be the poster child for domestic violence. You're not a poster child. You're proof that fighting back is possible, that successful, intelligent, capable women can find themselves in abusive relationships, and that there's no shame in getting out. But what if Clayton's lawyers convince everyone that I'm the real problem? Maureen smiled. Rebecca, I've been working with domestic violence survivors for 20 years. I can spot an abuser from across a room, but more importantly, I can spot a survivor. And you, my dear, are definitely a survivor. As Maureen left, Rebecca realized that Clayton's final manipulation had failed. For the first time in their relationship, his emotional blackmail hadn't worked. She wasn't rushing to save him from the consequences of his actions. She wasn't taking responsibility for his choices. 8 weeks later, Rebecca held her healthy baby daughter and made a decision that surprised everyone. She named the baby Grace Elizabeth Thompson, not Hayes. Grace for the second chance they'd both been given. Elizabeth for the strength she'd found within herself. And when the nurse asked if she wanted to add the father's name to the birth certificate, Rebecca looked down at her perfect and peaceful daughter and said, "Not yet, maybe not ever." Grace Elizabeth Thompson was born healthy and strong at 36 weeks, weighing 5 pounds and 12 ounces. Despite the early delivery triggered by stress, she had no complications and was breathing perfectly on her own. Rebecca held her daughter for the first time in the quiet of the hospital room, marveling at the tiny perfect fingers and the way Grace seemed to study her face with serious dark eyes. "She's beautiful," April whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She looks just like you." "She looks like herself," Rebecca said softly. "She looks like possibility." "Doctor," Mitchell completed his examination of the baby with a broad smile. "She's absolutely perfect. Rebecca, no signs of distress, excellent reflexes, strong heartbeat. You did good." "We did good," Rebecca corrected, looking down at Grace. "Both of us." Over the next few days, Rebecca's hospital room became a steady stream of visitors bringing support, flowers, and hope. Maureen Sullivan came by with a gift basket full of practical baby items and a card signed by dozens of women from her domestic violence support group. "They wanted you to know," Maureen explained, "that they're all rooting for you and Grace." Nadine Carter, the domestic violence counselor Rebecca had started seeing, visited with resources for new mothers leaving abusive relationships. "Rebecca, I want you to know that statistically, the first year after leaving an abusive partner is the most dangerous time, but it's also when women report feeling the strongest and most hopeful about their futures." "I feel both those things," Rebecca admitted, scared and hopeful at the same time. "That's normal. You're rebuilding your entire life while caring for a newborn. It's overwhelming, but you're not doing it alone." The legal proceedings moved forward with surprising efficiency. Clayton's character assassination defense fell apart when the prosecutor presented April's photographic evidence of Rebecca's previous injuries. Combined with Maureen's recording and testimonies from multiple witnesses about Clayton's controlling behavior, Vernon Matthews, Clayton's own lawyer, privately advised him to accept a plea bargain rather than go to trial. "Clayton, the evidence against you is overwhelming. If we go to trial, you're looking at potential felony charges. The plea bargain offers misdemeanor assault, anger management counseling, probation, and a permanent restraining order." Clayton sat in the holding cell, his expensive suit wrinkled and his usually perfect appearance disheveled. "What about my business? My reputation?" "Your business partnership is over. Leonard Burke has already filed paperwork to dissolve the company and start fresh without you. As for your reputation," Vernon shrugged, "the recording of you hitting your pregnant wife has been viewed over 2 million times on social media. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you lost control in that insurance office." "This is all her fault," Clayton muttered. "Rebecca turned everyone against me." "No, Clayton, you turned everyone against you when you chose to hit your wife in front of a witness. Rebecca didn't make you do that. You made that choice." For the first time since his arrest, Clayton was confronted with the reality that his actions had consequences he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. Meanwhile, Rebecca was discovering her own strength. Living temporarily in April's guest room with baby Grace, she found herself making decisions quickly and confidently. Choices about feeding schedules, sleep routines, pediatrician visits, without needing anyone's approval or validation. "It's amazing," she told Nadine during one of their counseling sessions. I forgot how good it feels to trust my own judgment. That's because your judgment is excellent. Rebecca, you just had someone systematically undermining your confidence for so long that you forgot. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong that proves I can't handle this on my own. And how are you handling things so far? Rebecca looked around April's living room, where Grace was sleeping peacefully in her bassinet while Rebecca worked on her laptop, managing the marketing campaign for a major client. Actually, I'm handling things pretty well. Grace is thriving. I'm keeping up with work. The divorce is progressing smoothly. I'm competent. You're more than competent. You're flourishing. The divorce settlement was finalized 6 months after Grace's birth. Clayton lost almost everything: the house, the cars, his business assets, and his professional reputation. He was ordered to pay substantial child support and medical expenses, but Rebecca had made it clear through her attorney that she wanted no alimony. "I don't want anything from him except financial support for Grace," she told her lawyer. "I want to know that I rebuilt my life entirely on my own." The day the divorce was finalized, Rebecca treated herself to something she hadn't done in over a year. She bought a new outfit without asking anyone's opinion. In a color Clayton had always said didn't suit her, bright red, and she looked fantastic in it. Rebecca had started speaking at domestic violence awareness events, sharing her story with audiences of survivors, advocates, and community leaders. Her message was always the same: abuse can happen to anyone. Leaving is possible, and rebuilding is not just about surviving, it's about thriving. "The most important thing I learned," she would tell audiences, "is that love doesn't require you to make yourself smaller. Real love celebrates your strength, supports your growth, and trusts your judgment. If someone claims to love you while systematically destroying your confidence in yourself, that's not love, that's possession." 6 months after Grace was born, Rebecca received an offer that changed everything. A major marketing firm, impressed by her resilience and her ability to manage both motherhood and a demanding career, offered her a senior position with a significant salary increase and flexible work arrangements. "It's like they're rewarding me for surviving," Rebecca told April over dinner. "They're rewarding you for being excellent at your job while navigating impossible circumstances. There's a difference." Rebecca accepted the position and found herself in the surprising situation of being more financially secure as a single mother than she'd ever been as Clayton's wife. "How is that possible?" she asked her financial advisor. "Simple. You're not supporting someone else's secret gambling debts and embezzlement habits. Clayton was draining your joint resources faster than either of you was earning them. Gambling debts. We found evidence of significant gambling losses in Clayton's financial records. Did you know he was flying to Las Vegas monthly for business trips that weren't actually business trips?" Rebecca shook her head, amazed by how much of her life had been built on lies she'd never suspected. "The good news," her advisor continued, "is that your individual credit is excellent, your earning potential is strong, and your financial future looks very bright." For the first time in years, Rebecca felt excitement about the future rather than anxiety about managing someone else's expectations. But the biggest surprise was waiting for her at the insurance office 6 months later. Rebecca needed to update her life insurance policy to reflect her new circumstances as a single mother. She called Maureen Sullivan's office to schedule an appointment, nervous about returning to the place where her old life had ended. "Rebecca." Maureen's face lit up when she walked into the office carrying baby Grace. "Look at this beautiful girl. How are you both doing?" "We're doing really well. Actually, better than I thought possible." As they updated Rebecca's policy information, Maureen shared something that made Rebecca's eyes fill with tears. "Rebecca, I want you to know that because of your courage that day, this office has become a safe place for women in crisis. We've had 17 women come forward since your story broke, all of them citing your example as the reason they found the courage to seek help. 17 women. 17 women who saw that fighting back was possible, that documenting abuse could make a difference, that even successful, intelligent women could find themselves in your situation, and that there was no shame in asking for help." Rebecca looked down at Grace, who was sleeping peacefully in her car seat, completely unaware that her existence had been part of a chain reaction that was saving other women's lives. "Maureen, can I ask you something? Anything?" Do you ever regret pressing record that day making the decision to get involved? Maureen smiled. Rebecca, that recording was the most important thing I've ever done in my professional life, maybe in my entire life. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see and for having the courage to document it. Thank you for having the courage to fight back. As Rebecca left the insurance office that day, she realized that the place where her marriage had ended was also the place where her real life had begun. The letter from Clayton arrived on the anniversary of the slap, exactly 1 year after that life-changing day in Maureen Sullivan's insurance office. Rebecca was in her new apartment, a bright, cheerful place she'd chosen entirely on her own, getting Grace ready for her first birthday party when April brought in the mail. Rebecca, April said carefully, there's something here from Clayton. Rebecca looked at the envelope with her name written in Clayton's familiar handwriting. A year ago, receiving a letter from him would have sent her into a panic spiral. Now, she felt nothing but mild curiosity. Should I open it? She asked April. Do you want to open it? Rebecca considered this. Actually, yes. I want to see if he's learned anything in the past year. The letter was 2 pages long, written on expensive stationery that Clayton had probably charged to his mother's account since his own credit was destroyed. Rebecca read it aloud to April. My dearest Rebecca, I know I'm not supposed to contact you, but I couldn't let this anniversary pass without reaching out. It's been a year since that terrible misunderstanding at the insurance office, and I've spent every day since then working on becoming the man you deserve. I've completed my anger management program with flying colors. My counselor says I've made remarkable progress in understanding my triggers and developing healthy coping mechanisms. I've also been attending therapy to work through the childhood trauma that contributed to my controlling behavior. I know I hurt you, and I take full responsibility for that moment of weakness. But Rebecca, I've changed. I'm not the same man who lost his temper that day. I've learned to communicate my feelings without letting anger take control. I miss you every single day. I miss our life together, our plans for the future, our dreams of raising Grace in a loving home. I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway, not for my sake, but for Grace's. She deserves to grow up with her father in her life. I'm willing to start slowly, maybe supervise visits at first, whatever makes you feel comfortable. I just want the chance to prove that I've changed, that I can be the husband and father you both deserve. I love you, Rebecca. I've never stopped loving you, and I believe that deep down, you still love me too. Love like ours doesn't just disappear because of one mistake. Please consider giving us another chance. For Grace's sake, if not for ours. All my love, Clayton P. S. I've enclosed photos of the new apartment I'm renting. I chose it specifically because it's in a good school district for Grace when she gets older. Rebecca set the letter down and looked at April, who was shaking her head in amazement. He really doesn't get it. Does he? April said. Not even a little bit, Rebecca agreed. Did you notice how he managed to write 2 pages about taking responsibility while actually taking responsibility for nothing? The moment of weakness and terrible misunderstanding parts were particularly impressive, April said sarcastically. Also, I love how he's already planning where Grace will go to school without having any legal right to make that decision. Rebecca picked up the photos Clayton had enclosed. The apartment was expensive looking, clearly chosen to impress rather than because he could afford it. He's still trying to manage my perception of him, Rebecca said, studying the photos. Look at this. He staged these pictures. Fresh flowers on the table, expensive furniture, everything positioned to look like the perfect family home. Are you going to respond? Rebecca walked over to Grace's high chair, where her daughter was happily mashing banana into her hair and babbling contentedly. At 1 year old, Grace was a joyful, confident baby who smiled easily and slept well. Traits Rebecca attributed to growing up in a home without tension and conflict. You know what I'm going to do, Rebecca said, picking up her phone. I'm going to document this letter and add it to the legal file, because even after a year of court-ordered therapy, Clayton is still trying to manipulate me. She photographed each page of the letter, noting the date and circumstances of its arrival, then called her attorney. Sarah, it's Rebecca Thompson. Clayton violated the no-contact order again. I'm sending you photos of a letter he sent to my home address. Her attorney's response was swift and professional. Rebecca, This is the third violation in 6 months. We can have him brought back before the judge if you want to pursue it. I do want to pursue it, not because I'm afraid of him anymore, but because other women need to see that restraining orders mean something, that there are real consequences for this behavior. After handling the legal aspects of Clayton's latest manipulation attempt, Rebecca turned her attention back to preparing for Grace's birthday party. The guest list was a testament to the life she'd built over the past year. April and her family, Maureen Sullivan, Nadine Carter, several co-workers who'd become genuine friends, and Dr. Mitchell, who'd become almost like a grandfather figure to Grace. As Rebecca hung streamers in her living room, she reflected on how different this celebration would have been if she'd stayed with Clayton. He would have insisted on an elaborate party designed to impress other people, probably held at some expensive venue with guests chosen for their social status, rather than their genuine care for Grace. Instead, Rebecca had planned a simple party in her apartment with people who actually loved them both. "Mama?" "Sure," Grace called out from her high chair, clapping her hands as she watched Rebecca decorate. "Yes, baby girl, it's your party day." Grace had started walking 2 weeks earlier, and she toddled over to Rebecca with the confident gait of a child who'd never learned to fear sudden mood changes or angry voices. She was growing up secure in the knowledge that her mother's love was unconditional and predictable. The party was perfect in its simplicity. Grace delighted in the attention, smearing chocolate cake across her face while the adults laughed and took pictures. Maureen brought a photo album filled with pictures and messages from the women who'd found courage through Rebecca's story. "Look at this," Maureen said, showing Rebecca a page filled with photos of women holding their own babies, their own new apartments, their college diplomas, their new jobs. 17 women last year became 43 women this year. Your story keeps rippling outward. Dr. Mitchell pulled Rebecca aside during the party to share some news. "Rebecca, I hope you don't mind, but I've been telling your story, with your permission, of course, to my medical students when I teach about recognizing domestic violence in pregnant patients. I'm honored, Dr. Mitchell. What you did that day, standing up for yourself despite being 7 months pregnant, trusting your instincts about what was right for you and your baby, it takes remarkable courage. I didn't feel courageous. I felt desperate. Sometimes those are the same thing." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, April helped Rebecca clean up while Grace napped in her crib. "Rebecca, can I tell you something?" April said as they loaded the dishwasher. "Always. A year ago, I was terrified that I was going to lose my best friend completely. I watched Clayton isolate you from everyone who cared about you, and I didn't know how to help without pushing you further away." Rebecca paused in her cleaning. "You saved my life. April, you and Maureen and Dr. Mitchell and everyone who refused to pretend everything was fine when it obviously wasn't. You saved your own life. We just witnessed it." That evening, after everyone had gone home and Grace was sleeping peacefully, Rebecca sat in her living room looking through the photo album Maureen had brought, page after page of women who'd found the courage to leave abusive relationships, to pursue education, to start businesses, to reclaim their lives. She thought about Clayton's letter, with its complete lack of understanding about what he'd actually done to her. He still saw their entire relationship through the lens of his own needs and desires. Even his apology was really a request for her to manage his emotions and make him feel better about his choices. But Rebecca was done managing other people's emotions. She was too busy building a life filled with genuine joy and authentic relationships. Her phone buzzed with a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "Hi, Rebecca. My name is Maria Santos. I saw your story on the news last year, and it gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband. I just wanted you to know that my daughter and I are doing great. We're safe, we're happy, and we're free. Thank you for showing me that fighting back was possible. A fellow survivor." Rebecca smiled and saved the message. She got texts like this regularly now, women reaching out to share their own stories of survival and transformation. She thought about responding to Clayton's letter, perhaps with a detailed explanation of why his approach was still manipulative and self-serving. But then she realized something important. Clayton's understanding of his behavior was no longer her responsibility. Instead, she opened her laptop and began typing a different kind of letter, a blog post for the Domestic Violence Awareness website where she'd become a regular contributor. 1 year ago today, My ex-husband hit me in front of a witness. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because I enjoyed being assaulted, not because I deserved it, but because for the first time in our relationship, there was undeniable evidence of what had been happening to me for months. Today, I received a letter from him asking for another chance. 2 pages of words designed to convince me that he's changed, that he's learned from his mistakes, that he deserves forgiveness. But here's what I've learned in the past year. Real change isn't about convincing other people you've changed. It's about changing your behavior consistently over time, without expectation of reward or recognition. Real remorse isn't about managing someone else's perception of your actions. It's about accepting full responsibility for the harm you've caused, without qualification or excuse. And real love isn't about possession, control, or getting what you want from another person. It's about supporting someone's growth, celebrating their strength, and trusting their judgment, even when their judgment leads them away from you. I don't know if my ex-husband has actually changed. What I know is that it no longer matters to me whether he has or not. His transformation, or lack thereof, is not my concern anymore. My concern is the life I'm building with my daughter, a life based on respect, autonomy, and genuine love. A life where disagreement doesn't lead to violence, where questions don't lead to punishment, where a woman's voice matters as much as anyone else's. To the women reading this who recognize their own stories in mine, your voice matters. Your judgment is trustworthy. Your safety is more important than anyone else's comfort. And to the men reading this who see themselves in my ex-husband's behavior, real change is possible, but it starts with honest self-reflection, not with trying to convince your victims to give you another chance. 1 year ago, I thought my life was ending. Today, I know it was just beginning. Rebecca posted the blog entry and closed her laptop. Through the baby monitor, she could hear Grace sleeping peacefully, making the small, contented sounds of a child who'd never known fear in her own home. Tomorrow, Rebecca would go to her job where she was respected and valued. She'd come home to an apartment she'd chosen herself, decorated according to her own taste, filled with people who celebrated her success rather than trying to diminish it. She'd made dinner plans with a colleague, Dr. Mitchell's research partner, actually, a kind, intelligent man who asked her opinions and listened to her answers, who seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts about everything from work projects to parenting challenges. It wasn't a romance, not yet, but it was the beginning of learning what healthy relationships felt like, relationships based on mutual respect rather than power and control. Rebecca turned off the lights and headed toward her bedroom, stopping to check on Grace one more time. Her daughter was sleeping on her back, arms flung wide with the complete abandon of a child who felt safe in the world. "Sweet dreams, baby girl," Rebecca whispered. "Tomorrow we keep building our beautiful life." The second letter from Clayton arrived on Grace's second birthday, and this time Rebecca didn't hesitate to open it. She'd learned that ignoring Clayton's attempts at contact only fueled his persistence, while documenting them consistently had been much more effective at maintaining boundaries. This letter was different from the first one, shorter, more focused, and somehow more desperate. "Rebecca, I know you didn't respond to my last letter, and I understand why. I've had more time to think about everything that happened between us, and I realize I may have approached you wrong before. I'm writing to tell you that I'm moving to Phoenix for a fresh start. My mother has connections there, and I think a change of scenery will be good for me. I wanted you to know that I'm not giving up on us, but I'm willing to give you the space you've asked for. I hope that someday, when Grace is older, you'll let her know that her father loved her and wanted to be part of her life. I hope you'll tell her that I made mistakes, but that I was trying to be better. I've enclosed my new address in Phoenix, in case you ever want to reach out. I'll understand if you don't. Clayton." Rebecca read the letter twice, then handed it to April, who was helping set up for Grace's birthday party. "Well," April said after reading it, "this one's less manipulative than the last one." "Is it though?" Rebecca asked. "Or is it just manipulative in a different way?" "What do you mean, the someday when Grace is older part? He's still trying to plant seeds for future contact. And the "I was trying to be better" narrative, he's still not taking full responsibility for his choices." Rebecca photographed the letter and filed it with the others, then focused on the more important task of celebrating her daughter's second birthday. Grace was walking confidently now, chattering in her own toddler language, and showing early signs of the independence and confidence that Rebecca had worked hard to nurture. She was fearless in the way that children raised without violence could be fearless, willing to explore, to try new things, to express her preferences clearly. "Mama cake," Grace announced, pointing toward the kitchen where her birthday cake waited. "After lunch, sweetheart. We're waiting for our friends to arrive." The guest list had grown over the past year. In addition to their core group of supporters, Rebecca had invited several women from her domestic violence support group who'd become genuine friends, along with their children. Her apartment was filled with the sound of children playing and women talking, a community of survivors who'd built new lives together. Maureen Sullivan arrived with a special gift, a savings account she'd opened in Grace's name, seeded with donations from the women who'd found courage through Rebecca's story. "It's for her college education," Maureen explained, "or whatever dreams she wants to pursue. We wanted her to know that she has a whole community of women invested in her future." Dr. Mitchell brought his research partner, Dr. James Chen, a pediatric psychologist who'd become Rebecca's closest friend over the past year. Their relationship had developed slowly and carefully, built on shared interests, mutual respect, and genuine compatibility. "James has something to ask you," Dr. Mitchell said with a knowing smile. James looked nervous, which Rebecca found endearing. "Rebecca, I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me next weekend. Just the two of us. As in, a date." Rebecca smiled. "I'd like that very much." It had taken her nearly 2 years to feel ready for romantic possibilities again. Not because she was afraid of men, but because she'd wanted to be completely confident in her own judgment before trusting someone else with her heart. James had proven himself over months of friendship, showing up consistently, respecting her boundaries, celebrating her successes, and demonstrating through his actions that he saw her as an equal partner in any relationship they might build. "Grace likes him," April observed later, watching James patiently help the toddler stack blocks while other adults chatted around them. "Grace likes everyone," Rebecca pointed out. "No, this is different. Look how comfortable she is with him. Children who grow up in homes without conflict have good instincts about people." Rebecca watched her daughter hand James block after block, chattering to him in her own language while he responded as if he understood every word. The sight filled her with a warmth she'd almost forgotten existed. "Rebecca," Nadine Carter said, joining the conversation, "I wanted to talk to you about something. The Domestic Violence Resource Center has received funding for a new program, and we'd like you to consider leading it." "What kind of program?" "Support groups specifically for women rebuilding their lives after leaving abusive relationships. Not just crisis intervention, but long-term empowerment work, teaching financial literacy, career development, healthy relationship skills." Rebecca felt a familiar flutter of excitement, the feeling she got when an opportunity aligned perfectly with her values and abilities. "I'd love to hear more about it. The position would be part-time initially, but there's potential for it to grow. You'd be helping women transition from survival mode to thriving mode, like I did. Exactly like you did." As the party continued around them, Rebecca thought about the unexpected trajectory her life had taken. 2 years ago, she'd been focused on managing Clayton's moods and meeting his expectations. Now, she was being offered the opportunity to help other women discover their own strength and rebuild their lives on their own terms. After the guests left and Grace was down for her nap, Rebecca sat in her living room with April, surrounded by the cheerful chaos of birthday party cleanup. "April, can I ask you something I've never asked before?" "Anything." "Were you ever afraid that I wouldn't be able to do this, rebuild my life, raise Grace alone, become independent again?" April was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "I was afraid you might not believe you could do it," she said finally. "But I was never afraid that you couldn't actually do it. You were always capable, Rebecca. Clayton just convinced you that you weren't. Sometimes I look at my life now, and I can barely remember the woman who was afraid to order a salad without asking permission. She's still part of you, but now she's the part that recognizes danger quickly and trusts her instincts completely." That evening, after Grace was asleep, Rebecca opened her laptop to write her monthly blog post for the Domestic Violence Awareness website. These posts had become a way for her to process her own growth while offering hope to other women who were still finding their way out of abusive situations? 2 years later, what I wish I could tell my past self. She began typing, 2 years ago today. My daughter was born 6 weeks early because the stress of finally standing up to my abusive husband triggered premature labor. I remember lying in that hospital bed, terrified about everything, my baby's health, my financial future, my ability to survive as a single mother. If I could go back and talk to that frightened woman, here's what I would tell her. You are stronger than you know. The voice in your head that's telling you something is wrong. Trust it. It's not paranoia or oversensitivity. It's wisdom. You don't need anyone's permission to protect yourself and your child. You don't need anyone's approval to make decisions about your own life. You don't need to justify your choices to people who weren't there when you needed them. The people who truly love you will support your decision to leave. The people who pressure you to stay are more invested in their own comfort than in your safety. Rebuilding your life will be harder than you imagine and easier than you fear. Some days will feel overwhelming, but every small step toward independence will make you stronger. Your daughter will thrive in a home without conflict. Children don't need fathers who can't treat their mothers with respect. They need examples of what healthy relationships look like. You will fall in love again, but this time with someone who celebrates your strength rather than trying to diminish it. And the love will be better because you'll know the difference between love and control. Most importantly, you are not broken. You are not damaged. You are not difficult or too much or any of the other labels that were used to make you smaller. You are a human being deserving of respect, kindness, and love. The life you're about to build will be more beautiful than anything you could have imagined while you were trapped in that relationship. Not because it will be perfect, but because it will be authentically yours. Today, my daughter turned 2 years old. She's confident, joyful, and fearless. She's never seen a man raise his voice to a woman. She's never learned that love comes with conditions or that safety is conditional on good behavior. She's growing up believing that her voice matters, that her opinions are valuable, that her boundaries deserve respect. She's learning what healthy relationships look like by watching the people in our life treat each other with kindness and respect. This is what victory looks like. Not revenge against the person who hurt you, but building a life so full of genuine love and respect that his opinion of you becomes irrelevant. To the women reading this who are still in the thick of it, you can do this. You are capable of more than you know. Your children will be proud of your courage. Your future self is waiting for you to take the first step. And to my past self, terrified in that hospital bed 2 years ago, look how far we've come. Look what we built. Look how beautiful our life became when we finally chose ourselves. Rebecca posted the blog entry and closed her laptop. Tomorrow, she would call Nadine about the job opportunity. She would confirm her date with James for the weekend. She would continue building the life that had started the day she refused to accept Clayton's version of reality as the truth. Through the baby monitor, she could hear Grace talking quietly to herself in her crib, practicing new words and making up songs. Her daughter was growing up in a world where women's voices mattered, where boundaries were respected, where love was demonstrated through kindness rather than control. Rebecca turned off the lights and headed to bed, grateful for the peaceful quiet of a home without conflict, proud of the strength she'd found within herself, and excited about the future she was building one choice at a time. Sometimes the worst moment of your life becomes the first moment of your real life. And sometimes, when you finally stop trying to save someone else, you discover that you're the one who needed saving all along.